Stratocaster. Introduced by Fender in 1954, it immediately stood apart from anything else on the market. Literally the body shape that everyone thinks when asked what an electric guitar is. The body has two different cutaways that let your hand reach higher frets without strain, and the contoured edges carved to follow the natural shape of the player's body. This made it by far more comfortable to play standing up or sitting down for long periods. It became the backbone of rock, blues, and pop, used by everyone from Jimi Hendrix to David Gilmour. The three single coil pickups give it a bright, clean, slightly glassy tone that cuts through a mix in a way few other guitars can. Telecaster. The Telecaster came before the Stratocaster, launched in the 1950s as one of the very first mass-produced solid-body electric guitars. The shape is simple and almost industrial, a flat slab body with a single cutaway and hard corners, nothing rounded or contoured. That simplicity was intentional. Fender wanted something easy to build and also easy to repair. The two single coil pickups produce a twangy, biting tone that became the defining sound of country music, though it can also translate well into rock and blues. Artists such as Keith Richards and Bruce Springsteen both built careers around this guitar. Jazzmaster. Fender released the Jazzmaster in 1958 and marketed it towards jazz players, though in reality it never really took off in that scene. The body is larger and offset. The upper and lower halves are shifted relative to each other, which changes how the guitar balances when you sit or when you stand with it. So it has a longer scale length and a floating tremolo system that works differently from the Stratocasters. Though it never really took off with jazz players, it definitely took off in surf and alternative rock musicians. Jaguar. So the Jaguar arrived in 1962 and looked oddly similar to the Jazzmaster at first glance, but it had meaningful differences. The scale length is shorter, making the string tension feel looser, and the frets easier to reach. The pickup switching system is more complex, with a set of individual switches that allow for a wider range of tonal combination. It was Fender's premium model at that time, priced above the Jazzmaster. It found its biggest audience not in the mainstream, but in the alternative rock world. Kurt Cobain famously played one of these and brought it back into the wide public attention. Mustang. Fender designed the Mustang in 1964 as a student model, something smaller, cheaper, and easier to handle for younger or beginner players. The body is compact, the scale is short, and the overall feel is light. Despite being positioned as an entry-level instrument, it developed a serious reputation among professional players who liked its unique feel and tonal character. It also came with a simple but functional tremolo system. Like the Jaguar, Kurt Cobain played it extensively, which pushed it far beyond its original student market identity. Coronado. The Coronado was Fender's attempt in 1966 to compete with the hollow and semi-hollow guitars being made by Gibson and other manufacturers. It has a fully hollow thin-line body with F-holes, which is a significant departure from the Fender's usual solid body approach. The tone is warmer and more resonant, with less of a sharp attack that defines most Fender guitars. It never became a bestseller, and Fender discontinued this after a few years. It has since been reissued a few times and hold a niche appeal among players who want a Fender with a more vintage jazz-influenced character. Toronado. The Toronado was produced in 1998 through the mid-2000s and represented a heavier, more rock-oriented direction for Fender. The body is a double cutaway design but thicker and chunkier than a Stratocaster, and it came fully loaded with humbucker pickups rather than single coils. That gave it a much darker, fuller tone, suited to hard styles of playing. It was part of Fender's effort to attract players who had gravitated towards the Gibson-style guitars. Production was relatively short-lived, but it has a dedicated following among players who appreciate its distinct look and heavier sound. Duosonic. The Duosonic was introduced in 1956, also as a student guitar with a short scale and a simple two-pickup layout. The body shape is modest and straightforward. Over the decades, it came and went from Fender's catalog, but modern reissues have brought it renewed attention. Players drawn to lo-fi, indie, and alternative sounds have embraced it. It sits in a similar space to the Mustang, originally aimed at beginners, now appreciated by players who prefer its specific feel and character. Swinger, sometimes called the Arrow or the Musiclander, is one of the stranger entries into Fender's history. It was created in the late 1960s, not as a planned guitar, but as a way to use leftover parts. Fender had excess Musicmaster bodies and bass 5 necks that weren't moving as much as they wanted to, so they were combined and reshaped into a new instrument. And the result was an odd-looking guitar with a pointed lower horn that gave it an arrow-like silhouette. It was sold briefly and then quietly discontinued. It's more of a curiosity today than a widely played instrument. Starcaster. The Starcaster appeared in 1976 as another one of Fender's attempts to capture the semi-hollow guitar market. It has an offset body styling similar to the Jazzmaster family, but with F-holes and a hollow construction. It came with humbucker pickups, which was uncommon for Fender at that time. Sales were modest, and it was discontinued by the early 1980s. Decades later, though, Radiohead's Johnny Greenwood began playing one on stage, and that exposure sparked a significant wave of renewed interest. Fender eventually reissued it, and it has since found a more stable place in the catalog as a genuine, versatile instrument. Musicmaster. Fender introduced the Musicmaster in 1956, alongside with the Duosonic. The key difference was simple. The Musicmaster came with only one pickup instead of two, making it the more stripped-back, affordable option of the pair. The tone was basic and light, suited to a beginner who just needed something functional to learn on. It stayed in production for decades with minor updates along the way. Bronco. So the Bronco was introduced in 1967 and borrowed the Mustang's compact body shape, but it simplified almost everywhere else. It had a single pickup position at the bridge and came with an integrated tremolo and bridge unit. The result was a guitar that was easy to manufacture and easy to sell at a low price. Its small size and lightweight made it genuinely fun to play, and it has held a quiet appeal among collectors and lo-fi enthusiasts. Lead series. Fender launched the Lead 1, 2, and 3 in 1979 as a direct response to the growing threat from Gibson guitars and inexpensive imports. The body shape was new, slightly smaller than a Stratocaster, with a symmetrical double cutaway design. Each version in the series varied in its pickup configuration, moving from a single humbucker on the Lead 1 to a different combination on the Lead 2 and 3. They were competitively priced and genuinely well built. Maverick. The Maverick, also sold under the name Custom, was built in 1969 from leftover electric 12 bodies that Fender had no other use for. And rather than write them off, Fender converted them into 6-string guitars. The headstock was especially distinctive, a long angled shape that players quickly nicknamed the hockey stick. Electric 12. The Electric 12 was Fender's dedicated 12-string electric guitar. Released in 1965, during the peak of the 12-string craze, driven by the bands like The Byrds. The body used the familiar offset design of the Jazzmaster and Jaguar family, which helped it feel recognizable despite being a different instrument. The pickups were a split single-coil design developed specifically for this guitar, and the headstock had to be elongated dramatically to accommodate all 12-string tuning pegs. It produced a rich, chiming tone that sat beautifully in recordings. Katana. The Katana was Fender's attempt in 1985 to stay relevant during the shred and heavy metal era. when players were gravitating towards aggressive, angular guitar designs from brands like Jackson and Dean. So the body of this guitar was shaped into a sharp pointed V with clean geometric lines. Almost nothing about it looked like a traditional Fender product. Fender players who were loyal to the Stratocaster and Telecaster largely ignored it, and it was gone from the catalog within a year. It remains one of the most visually unusual guitars the company ever produced. Performer. Also released in 1985, the Performer took a different approach to the same problem the Katana was trying to solve. Rather than a V shape, it had a jagged, asymmetrical body with sharp angles cut into it, and the headstock was shaped to resemble a flame. The overall aesthetic was meant to appeal to the same rock and metal audience. Like the Katana, it didn't connect with players and was short-lived. The two guitars together represent a brief, uncomfortable period where Fender tried to become something it wasn't. Meteora. Fender introduced the Meteora in 2018, and unlike most of the unusual entries in this list, it was a deliberate and well-considered modern design, rather than a parts bin solution or a trend-chasing experiment. The body takes visual cues from both the Telecaster and the Jazzmaster. You can see the Telecaster's angular lower bout and the offset waist of the Jazzmaster family. It has been well received. The result is a guitar that feels connected to Fender's history while looking genuinely fresh.